It's Nancy with Icon Apprentice, and welcome back as we go into our next stage of doing Our Lady of Fatima. And what we're going to be doing today, we'll be putting on our outside border, and then we'll be putting some highlights on her robe and getting ready then to do her flesh and to do the inner globe, which would be her heart surrounded by a crown of thorns and her pendant. And then lastly, after we finish with the flesh, we'll go in and we'll put the rosary beads in and we will do her halo. So let's go ahead and let's say our prayers and get ready to paint these prayers into our icon. So what we're going to be using is antique green to do our outside border. And that outside border is going to be fairly loose. We don't want a really opaque, in other words, we can't see through it color. What we're looking for is nice transparency, because what we would like to have happen is that this layer underneath that we've already laid in would kind of like for some of that to show through. So we want to mix up a nice loose color, antique green, that's going to go on very transparent. And we'll start laying it in. And you can see how I am varying my strokes. Now I'm taking this and I'm just laying it very close to the edge of the border. You can tape that off if you want. But it's not necessary. If you feel like you've got the control, go ahead. Lay it next to the border, pull it out. And try to vary your brush strokes. Don't All right, so there we have the outer border. We'll let that dry, and then we're going to go in and we're going to start working on some of the highlights on her robe. All right, so our border's pretty much dry. it's a little tiny cool. You can tell if it's a little warmer to the touch, it's dry. If it's a little cooler to the touch, it's still a little bit damp. So that's just a good rule of thumb to make sure that you are not going to be going back in and lifting paint on something. But for our purposes, this is dry enough for us to go ahead and start working on her robe. And so we're going to be working on Mary's robe. The first color that we're going to lay down for that is going to be Unbleached Titanium. And so we'll mix a little bit of flow medium and some water with the Unbleached Titanium. And we'll go in then and start setting up our highlights on the robe, because we've already base coated this with our Naples yellow hue. And so what we're looking for right now then is just going to be starting our highlighting. So the first thing we're going to want to do is get our color copy, our reference copy, and look at where the brightest highlights are going to be. And you can see that we're going to be putting the biggest highlights will be coming in here, right across the front here, right close to these lines. And then when we get down into the robe, you can see where we're going to be making those railroad tracks again that we talked about before. And I'll go through and show you some of those just to make sure everybody's on the same page and we understand where we're headed with this. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. And we're starting with some color right in here. I'm going to get nice and close to that line and pull that up. And then we just kind of want to feather that out a little bit. Next one, right next to the line. Pull that in, let it trail out. And so it doesn't have a hard line, just feather it out a little bit. You may be thinking that it's strange that there's some highlights on the interior of this robe. However, just remember our rule. Our rule is that the flesh itself emanates light in the spiritual world. And so we're going to just kind of keep that in mind as we go through. When we're laying down highlights, if it's near flesh, it's probably going to be brighter than if it's away from the flesh. Inside here, down close to that line, close to this line, and then we're going to just fan it just like that. Where we're going to make little railroad tracks. So think about it. is done. And we'll let this dry, and then we're going to go back in, and the second highlight is going to be done with warm white. While it's drying, let's go ahead and put our flesh in. Then it'll be completely dry whenever we come back in for the next highlight. So we are going to lay a couple of coats of color for the flesh, the base coat. And again, this is our color called Sankir. And the Sankir is olive green and gold oxide. And I'll have the recipe for you in the description box at the bottom of the video. And you can also refer to past videos as far as how to mix that up. It's not something that, not a color that you can purchase, it's a color that you mix up. So, we will go ahead. I'm going to get some clean water because I used the other water I was using with my white. So I'll get some clean water here for our Sankir, and go ahead and make sure that this is a nice creamy mixture. Nice loose consistency, but not too loose. So just a little bit of water. This mostly has flow medium when I mix the two paints together. And as we go through and we do the flesh, just remember we're going to be using different strokes in different directions so that we don't get a line. And we are going to take it over all the flesh and make a nice consistency. And what we're doing is we're trying to get to a point where we're not completely obliterating these lines, for instance, for the eyes and the nose and the mouth and that kind of thing, but we are going to get pretty dark. And if we have to, we will come back and reinstitute some of those lines. So we try to make it a smooth application. If it gets a little streaky, please don't worry about that too much. We can come back in and fix that. Just remember, this kind of starts to dry pretty quickly. So one of the things we do not want to do is overwork a place and start lifting our paint. And this acrylic paint, if you're not careful, definitely will start to lift on you once it starts drying and you go back in trying to work in some of the color again. I got a little bit out of the lines. Go in with a damp brush and pull that Sankir out of there. Okay. Somebody asked me the other day, well, how many coats will I need to put on this? Well, it depends on you. Depends on if you have a light hand or a heavy hand when you start putting your color down. So quite honestly, I can't tell you how much you're going to need, or how long, how many coats of paint you're going to have to put on here. That's going to be entirely up to how you lay the paint down. What's your technique? Are you conservative? Do you grab it and just throw it on? go back in for your second coat, you want to make sure that it's dry, but you also want to make sure you're going to go a different direction. So you can see on the face, most of my first strokes went down this direction. For my second coat, I'm going to go crossways, even out those brush strokes. You can see right here, this part was a little bit damp when I laid this new coat on. Maybe I had it a little bit thick, and you can see it's lifted just a little bit, and this also I think was not completely dry. That's one of the dangers you have to watch when you go back in and start doing a different coat, second coat. You really want to be careful and make sure that paint is completely dry. So while the flesh is drying, I'm going to go in and put our second highlight on the robe. The first highlight, remember, we base coated with Naples Yellow Hue. Then the first highlight that we put on was Unbleached Titanium. The second highlight that we're going to use is going to be Warm White. You can see how it's going to be very important that as we apply this second highlight, remember, each successive highlight we're shrinking up. Less is more. We're not covering the entire highlight that we just laid down, but we're adding to it. We're just going to shrink it up a little bit. So once again, your color reference copy is going to be really important to show you where the brightest brights are, and there's just going to be a few little areas where we're going to lay in some of those really bright colors. So just remember to look for those. Keep that handy, and let's get started here. Alright, so our Sankir flush is dry, and so we're going to be able to move on then to our flush 1. So our base coat flush is Sankir, and our flush 1 is this tangerine color, and we use, that is mixed, and I'll have the recipe for you. Mix that ahead of time. And it is mixed using a couple of different colors, plus we put Flow Medium, of course, into it. Now this was 3 coats of the Sankir. Yours may take 2, yours may take 6. That's up to you. So, just remember, all depends on your personal touch. So let's go in and let's start laying in the flesh color. And it's a little difficult to see, but I think we can see where this is. And so the first thing we'll do is we'll go in and lay in her eyes. And let's do her nose first. Okay. There's the nose. Turn it down a little bit. You can see a little better. In the eye. Okay. Reference copy here, and we want to put that mouth. I kind of lost her mouth a little bit. Maybe I better quit. Get the line drawing out before we go too much further. Since I did lose her mouth, I should. Let's get this out and see where her mouth really should be. That's pretty good right there. So her mouth is down here a little bit further. Yeah, I got everything a little bit too high. So what I'm going to do is get my tracing paper, and we're going to reinstate that, just reinstate the mouth. So I've lined up my tracing paper and my image, and I've lined that up with what I have here pretty much. I mean, this is, you can see it well enough to really kind of get in there and get that image right on there. And I'm going to take my white transfer paper and just put that in there. And then I'm just going to take my red pencil and just go over this a little bit. Let's see what we get here. Alright, so We have the nose pretty much where it should be. The mouth was a tiny bit off, and so was the chin. So that works. All right. So now we can come in here and we can pick up our paint again, and we will just make sure that we've got these colors on here. On the reference color copy, you can see we have a little upper neck, little line in there. So we want a little bit of that to be pretty dark. So I think we'll probably come about here like that. down and let's do the fingers. Trying to leave just a tiny bit of designation between those fingers, so I'm trying not to completely obliterate here. I have my line between the two hands. Since they're overlapping, it's going to be kind of difficult, but you can leave just a tiniest line just so that you kind of have an idea of where that thumb starts and stops there. So darker area right in here and along this outside of the finger, darker area right here. Okay, a little bit darker in here. This is going to be really bright. The tops and the centers of the fingers are going to be really bright. This top of the thumb is bright and the bottom is going to be darker. So that's where we're going to kind of come in and start. The bottom's going to be darker, the top's going to be brighter. And if you see on your reference copy, the hand is kind of rounded there. There's going to be a darker area right in between the palm and the thumb. So we'll make that distinction here. We'll leave a tiny darker line right in there. This part of the hand is going to be very bright right around the knuckles as well. Our color copy, the top part of this finger is going to be darker. Toward the middle, it's going to be a little bit lighter.